Almost every morning, a friend of mine and myself, and sometimes others, get on the phone and we have discussions. These discussions are always either in electronic discussion, which both of us have an electronics background, and sometimes we have discussions of, to me, great importance. Today we were talking about how confusing it was to talk to certain people, people who either are convinced that they know everything about a subject, or they have a sense of peace within their own life by the acceptance formally that they had experienced everything in their life at some point, and now it was just a matter of relating everything that they see from then forward to the pieces that already existed. The problem with this is that the pieces that already exist may not be all of the pieces. It's kind of like putting a puzzle together, and you have several pieces that fit perfectly together. And if you're aware that you don't have the pieces or the correct pieces to make the picture, then it's easy. You just say, well, I don't have all the pieces, and you keep looking for the pieces. But if you've convinced yourself that this puzzle is the complete puzzle, although it's not rectangle or square, you convince yourself that you can see the picture and that's all there is to the puzzle, then when somebody else comes to you and tells you something new, you don't recognize it as a possibility to fit in your puzzle, because you have described this, you have understood this puzzle that you built as being a simulation, a mental simulation in your life. This mental simulation actually becomes your ego based on the assimilation of all of your experiences in your life. These experiences and reactions have developed what you call your life. And you look within this ego or life experiences to find everything else and to how it relates to these experiences. That is, if you at some point in time have become fearful and you're so concerned about knowing everything that you've cut yourself off, and now you're living in a world where your mind you can still hear, obviously, and you can still see, but you only try to relate it to your known experiences. The problem with this is, to me, it's obvious, and I hope it's the same to everyone else, is if you had an experience that's not in those experiences, it shocks your system. It's like somebody who's never experienced a hurricane because they live in the place where there's always ice storms. They would come to where there's a hurricane, and it would be a real problem for them to deal with the fact that there's a hurricane and it's all new, and they're trying to relate it to the winds of an ice storm. Their preparation would be all wrong. It would be preparation, but it'd be all wrong, and their reactions may be either overestimated or underestimated depending on their reactions to everything in the past. The only reason that we would create such an internal world cut off from the actual world is we find safety in this world. And at some point in time we learn that each time something new that came into our existence, there was an interruption, and you had to reorient everything that you learned, kind of like if you would find another piece of the puzzle and it didn't fit into your puzzle because you had forced pieces to fit where they shouldn't. So here it is, you're trying to find the place for this piece of a puzzle that actually fits, but because you have chipped away at the reality of the other pieces, you no longer can see the picture the way it should be. Once you've cut away pieces of the puzzle, you can't see the actual picture with the intent or the way that the truth of the picture should be. And now you're really screwed up. The only way that you can find the truth about the picture is to either see somebody else who has a picture that's clear, possibly if you plead with God to allow you to throw away all of your pieces of puzzle and give you everything new, and then you might have a chance, if you don't try to add to or take away from the puzzle pieces, maybe using a knife to carve a new piece to fit into place. It might look, you just don't want to do that. And this is what people do with truth. They take the truth, they hear it, they add to it or take away the things that will be palatable for them, and they try to force it into certain areas. It's always stressful, and it never ends up with a good picture of what the truth actually is. But this is what we do. I have met many people who have always assumed that they have had the same experience that I'm trying to explain to them, or some variation that would be basically the same thing. The problem with this is it's very difficult to see or hear what the other person's saying if you're always assuming that you have experienced it, so you actually miss information that the person's speaking to you. I used to teach, and many occasions I would have a student that thought that they knew electronics, and during the class they would try to interject in their notes what they thought they understood, and the notes would then be wrong. The misperception of that truth that they tried to integrate into their brain and to learn was wrong, and the misinformation would cause everything having to do with that particular piece of information to cause a false image to be in their head, and they would no longer be able to troubleshoot the electronics as they should, because they had misperceptions in their mind that would lead them down a rabbit hole, as we normally say, lead them in the wrong path. The way that I have learned how to deal with such things is to, first, the acceptance that I can't possibly know everything. 2, I have to realize the things that I truly know without having to convince myself or anyone else that it is absolutely the truth. In the case of electronics, many a times you run across pieces of hardware that you don't know fully what it does, but you can troubleshoot certain sections of it because you know how those sections operate, but you don't know how those sections operate as a whole. So you troubleshoot individual pieces. This type of troubleshooting is valid, and it's also valid in the world of the truth. When we recognize something is true, sometimes we get an awareness or a feeling deep within that's like the truth is not. There's something missing. Rather than trying to force it, just accept the fact that there's something missing and keep looking until your desire, or your relationship to the truth that you is the same as the relationship to the pieces of truth that you absolutely know is true. There's a seatedness that takes place within the very soul or spirit of who you are that's at rest when the truth is present and you're comfortable with it, not having to convince yourself or anyone else for that matter that it is true. And when your mind is capable of seeing this information, the entirety of who you are becomes at peace and at rest, not needing to react. At that point, you can choose to react, of course, on the knowledge that you have. But the desire to have to react is usually some level of panic within yourself. This is always an error or a cause for concern, pointing to there is an error in your thinking as far as the truth is concerned. My goal with doing these little short snips of audio is that I will be able to bring what we talk about in the mornings to other people that may be interested, period. We often come across some very interesting information or knowledge that usually gets lost in the conversation, and unless somebody writes it down or records it, it stays lost until it's needed again in the future by the one who spoke it. So hopefully this has been of use to you, and I appreciate you letting me know. And if you also have any other questions that I might be able to find the answers for you, I would love to hear them, and I will make whatever recordings are needed to allow that to take place. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.